The Kepler Collective's research outpost sat on the edge of a vast canyon on Zeta Prime, a planet with rust-colored soil and skies that turned purple during sunset. The base was not very large. It had white buildings and metal towers that pointed toward the sky. Scientists and workers moved around the base every day, conducting experiments and studying the strange world around them. Dr. Thomas Riley had been working at the outpost for 7 years. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He spent most of his time in the research laboratory, staring at computer screens and reading old files. For the past 2 years, he had been focused on one mystery that nobody could solve. Deep in the canyon, buried halfway into the ground, was something that the ancient records called the Guardian. Nobody knew exactly what the Guardian was. The records suggested it was left behind by the architects, a civilization that had disappeared thousands of years ago. The architects had built many things across the galaxy, but most of their creations had been destroyed or lost to time. The Guardian was different. It was still there, still whole, still standing exactly where it had been placed 1,358 years ago. Thomas first saw the Guardian when he arrived at the outpost. It was enormous. The structure was made of a material that looked like crystal, but it was harder than any rock or metal anyone had ever tested. It had a shape that was difficult to describe. It had points and curves, angles that seemed to shift when you looked at them from different directions. The entire structure glowed very slightly, a faint blue light that came from deep within the crystal. But it never changed. It never moved. It just stood there silent and still. Scientists before Thomas had tried everything to wake it up. They had sent energy signals to it. They had analyzed its structure with every scanner available. They had studied the ancient texts about the architects and tried to understand what the Guardian was supposed to do. Nothing worked. The Guardian remained motionless. It remained silent. It was like trying to talk to a statue. After hundreds of years of study, most people had given up. They believed the Guardian was simply a monument, a leftover piece of alien architecture that no longer worked. But Thomas could not accept this explanation. He believed that something so large and so carefully built must have had a purpose. He spent his days reviewing old research, looking for something that others had missed. He read documents written by scientists from 50, 100, 200 years ago. He looked for patterns. He looked for clues. And slowly he started to notice something strange. Every few decades, someone would attempt to activate the Guardian using a different method. Each attempt would fail. But before each failure, the Guardian's light would change slightly. It would become brighter or dimmer. It would shift colors. These changes were small, but they were real. Thomas became obsessed with this discovery. He began to map out every attempt and every change in the Guardian's light. He worked late into the night, comparing data and writing notes. His small office filled with papers and diagrams. His colleagues thought he was wasting his time. They thought he was chasing ghosts. But Thomas did not care what they thought. He was certain that the Guardian was trying to communicate. It was responding to each attempt, even though nobody had realized it. One afternoon, Thomas was in his office when Dr. Sarah Wells, the team's xenoarchaeologist, came to visit him. Sarah was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and glasses. She was intelligent and kind, but she was also practical. She believed in evidence and logic. She looked at Thomas's office filled with papers and shook her head. "Thomas, you need to stop this," she said gently. "You are not sleeping. You are not eating properly. You are making yourself sick over something that cannot be solved." "But Sarah, I have found something," Thomas replied. He showed her his diagrams and his data. He explained the pattern he had discovered. Sarah listened carefully. She studied his work. And slowly her expression changed. She leaned closer to the papers. She asked questions. She understood what Thomas was trying to say. "This is interesting," Sarah admitted. "But even if you are right, what does it mean? We still do not know how to activate it." "We need someone who thinks differently," Thomas said. "Someone who does not think like a scientist. Someone who works with their hands. Someone who understands machines." That is when they heard about Olivia Webb. Olivia was a mechanic who had recently been assigned to the outpost. She had been sent there to maintain the base's equipment and repair machines that broke down. Nobody expected her to do much more than that. She was not a scientist. She did not have advanced degrees. She had grown up on a space colony where people had to fix things themselves or the colony would not survive. She had learned to work with machines by working with them, not by reading about them in books. When Thomas and Sarah met Olivia for the first time, they found her in the maintenance bay, working on one of the base's transport vehicles. She was a woman in her 30s with dark hair tied back in a practical braid. Her hands were stained with machine oil. She was listening to music through small earpieces while she worked. Thomas explained the situation to her. He told her about the Guardian and about his discovery. He asked if she would be willing to look at it and maybe offer a different perspective. Olivia stopped working and looked up at him. She smiled. "Show me this thing," she said. "I like puzzles." They took a transport vehicle out to the canyon. As they drove closer, the Guardian came into view. It was massive and strange and beautiful all at once. Olivia stared at it through the vehicle's window as they approached. She did not say anything. She just stared. When they arrived at the location, Olivia stepped out of the vehicle and walked toward the Guardian. She walked slowly, studying it from different angles. She walked around it, looking at how it connected to the ground. She looked at the places where its surface had worn smooth over the centuries. She observed everything. Finally, she turned to Thomas and Sarah and smiled that same smile. "Hold my beer," Olivia said. "I think I know what this thing needs." Olivia Webb stood before the Guardian with her hands on her hips, studying it like she was trying to understand an old friend. Thomas and Sarah watched from a safe distance, uncertain what she was planning to do. Olivia had asked them to give her some space, and they had agreed, though neither of them felt confident about leaving a mechanic alone with an ancient alien structure worth more than their entire research station. The first thing Olivia did was touch the Guardian. She placed her palm flat against its crystalline surface and closed her eyes. Thomas thought she was being foolish. The material was hard and cold, and nothing about touching it would reveal any useful information. But Olivia kept her hand there for nearly a minute. When she finally opened her eyes, she looked thoughtful. "It's warm," she said to herself. "Warmer than it should be. That means there is energy moving inside it somewhere." She pulled a small handheld device from her toolbox, something that measured heat and energy signatures. She ran it across different sections of the Guardian's surface. The device beeped and clicked as she worked. After several minutes, Olivia made a small marking on the crystal with a piece of chalk. Then she made another marking and another, creating a pattern of dots across the Guardian's surface. "What are you doing?" Sarah called out from her safe distance. "Looking for the heart," Olivia replied without looking up. "Every machine has a heart. The place where the power comes from. If I find it, I can understand what is wrong." Thomas moved closer to watch her work. Olivia was moving methodically, checking different areas, making notes in a small book she carried. She was treating the Guardian like any other machine, even though it was clearly far more advanced than anything in the research station's repair bay. This was what made her different from the scientists, Thomas realized. She was not afraid of it. She was not respectful of it in a way that prevented her from working. To her, it was simply a problem that needed solving. After 2 hours of investigation, Olivia climbed down from the Guardian and sat on the ground. She was breathing heavily and her clothes were covered with dust and crystal residue. She drank from a water bottle and closed her eyes for a moment. "The energy signature is weak," she announced. "Weaker than it should be for something this size. It is like the power is stuck somewhere. Like the flow is blocked." "We already knew there was an energy problem," Sarah said, a note of frustration in her voice. "That is why we have been trying to activate it for so long." "You knew there was a problem," Olivia corrected her. "You did not know what kind of problem. There is a difference. A big difference." Over the next 3 days, Olivia worked on the Guardian without stopping. She brought equipment from the maintenance bay. She brought welding tools and diagnostic scanners and cables and things that Thomas did not even recognize. She crawled into small spaces that seemed impossible for a human body to fit into. She emerged covered in dirt and crystalline dust. She returned to her work without complaining. The research team was horrified. This was not how scientific work was supposed to be done. Studies were supposed to be careful and controlled and documented thoroughly. But Olivia was working by instinct and experience. She was fixing things the way a mechanic fixes things, with trial and error and practical knowledge. Thomas wanted to stop her, but he also wanted to see what would happen. So he allowed her to continue. On the 4th day, Olivia discovered something important. She found a maintenance shaft that the earlier surveys had somehow missed. Inside the shaft was a network of passages that led deep into the Guardian's core. These passages were filled with crystalline structures that looked like circuitry, though they were far more complex than any computer technology humans had developed. Olivia photographed everything and brought her findings to Thomas and Sarah. "Look at this," she said, showing them the images on her portable device. "These passages are pathways for energy. Energy flows through them to power the whole structure. But these pathways are blocked. They are blocked with something that looks like sediment or mineral deposits. It is like the Guardian was deliberately shut down, and then nature covered up the shut-off point." "But why would it be deliberately shut down?" Sarah asked. Does not matter why, Olivia said. What matters is that I can unblock it. But I need your help with something. I need power. I need a way to run a strong energy current through the Guardian to clear these blockages. Thomas and Sarah exchanged looks. They understood what Olivia was suggesting. She wanted to use the outpost's main power generator to send energy directly into the Guardian. The risk was enormous. If something went wrong, it could destroy the Guardian completely. It could also destroy the outpost. No scientist would approve such a dangerous experiment. But Thomas thought about his years of research. He thought about the pattern he had discovered. He thought about how the Guardian had been responding to each attempt over the centuries. He looked at Olivia, who was standing calmly with her arms crossed, confident in her assessment. Do it, Thomas said. Sarah gasped. Thomas, we cannot approve this without going through proper channels. We need to report this to the director. We need to follow protocol. Protocol has not worked for 1,358 years, Thomas replied. Olivia is right. We need to try something different. It took Olivia another 2 days to set up the energy transfer system. She ran cables from the outpost's power generator to the Guardian. She connected diagnostic equipment to monitor the flow. She calibrated everything carefully. When she was finally ready, she called Thomas and Sarah to witness what she was about to do. If this works, she said, the Guardian should respond. If it does not work, we might damage it beyond repair. Are you sure you want me to go ahead? Thomas nodded. Sarah was nervous but also nodded. Olivia smiled that confident smile of hers. She pressed a button on her portable device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cables began to glow with energy. The power flowed into the Guardian like water flowing into a thirsty plant. The crystalline structure began to light up from the inside. Colors shifted across its surface. Blues and greens and purples that had not been seen in over 1,000 years. And then the Guardian began to hum. It was a low sound at first, barely audible. But it grew stronger and deeper. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble slightly. The Guardian was waking up. It was answering Olivia's call. The humming sound grew louder and more intense. Thomas felt it vibrate through his entire body, not just in his ears but in his bones and in his chest. The Guardian's light became brighter, shifting from soft blue to brilliant white. Olivia stood motionless, watching the energy flow through the cables into the ancient structure. Sarah had stepped back, gripping a handrail for balance as the ground continued to shake. The tremors grew stronger. Small rocks tumbled down the canyon walls. Dust rose from the ground in clouds that turned golden in the Guardian's light. The outpost's alarm systems began to sound, warning bells ringing across the settlement. Workers inside the base emerged from buildings, confused and frightened by the sudden earthquake. We need to get to safety, Sarah shouted over the noise. But Thomas could not move. He was watching the Guardian with amazement and wonder. The crystalline structure began to move. At first, it was just small vibrations like it was shaking off centuries of sleep. Then sections of it started to rotate. Massive pieces that looked like they should be solid began to shift and separate. The Guardian was unfolding, opening itself like a flower blooming in fast motion. Each movement was deliberate and graceful, despite the tremendous size and weight of the structure. Olivia remained completely calm. She was watching her portable device, monitoring the energy flow and the Guardian's response. She made small adjustments to the power levels, increasing here and decreasing there, fine-tuning the process like she was conducting an orchestra. Come on, old friend, she whispered to the Guardian. Show us what you can do. The Guardian rose higher. Its base sections lifted from the ground with a deep grinding sound that echoed across the canyon. The crystalline form expanded and straightened, sections locking into place with precision that seemed almost gentle for something so massive. The Guardian grew taller and taller, until it towered above the research outpost like a mountain that had learned to stand on its own. Thomas estimated it was at least 300 meters tall, perhaps more. Its form was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It was made of sharp angles and smooth curves working together in perfect harmony. The entire structure glowed with internal light, colors shifting and changing in patterns that seemed to hold meaning, like it was trying to speak in a language of pure illumination. The main cable connecting the Guardian to the outpost's power generator began to glow brighter. Olivia watched the readings on her device with intense concentration. The energy flow was enormous. The Guardian was drawing more power than anything the outpost had ever attempted to operate. The power generator was working at its absolute maximum capacity. Olivia, we need to shut this down, Sarah called out, fear clear in her voice. The generator cannot handle this much output. It will burn out. It will fail. Not yet, Olivia replied calmly. Just a little bit more. Almost there. The Guardian's harmonic tone reached a crescendo, a sound so deep and powerful that it seemed to vibrate through the very air itself. Thomas felt his ears ringing. He felt his teeth aching from the vibration. The entire world seemed to shake with the Guardian's awakening. This was not just a machine turning on. This was something ancient and powerful remembering how to exist. Then, suddenly, the Guardian's movements became smoother and more controlled. The desperate, urgent quality of the awakening transformed into something purposeful and deliberate. The harmonic tone softened and became almost musical. The frantic energy flow through the cables stabilized. The Guardian reached its full height and seemed to relax, as if it had stretched after a very long sleep. Olivia finally pressed the button to disconnect the power. The cables went dark. The flow of energy stopped. The Guardian stood motionless, but it was no longer the dead, silent thing it had been. It was alive. Its internal light pulsed gently, shifting through colors like a heartbeat made of luminescence. The tremors ceased. The dust settled slowly back to the ground. An eerie silence fell over the canyon, broken only by the fading alarm bells from the outpost. The workers who had emerged from the building stood frozen, staring at the impossible sight before them. The Guardian was no longer a mystery or a monument. It was present and real and awake. Thomas walked toward Olivia, his legs feeling unsteady. She was watching the Guardian with an expression of deep satisfaction, as if she had just completed a task she had always known she was capable of doing. "You did it," Thomas said simply. "We did it," Olivia corrected him. "Your research told me where to look. Sarah's knowledge about the architects helped me understand what I was seeing. I just applied some mechanical common sense." She paused and smiled. "That is how real work gets done. It takes different kinds of knowledge working together." Sarah joined them, her fear gradually transforming into wonder. She pulled out a portable scanner and began to take readings of the Guardian. The energy signatures were strong and stable. The structure was intact and functioning perfectly. Everything that her instruments could measure suggested that the Guardian was not just alive, but healthy. "The ancient record said the Guardian was a protector," Sarah whispered. "A sentinel left behind to watch over this world. But it could not protect anything if it could not wake up." As if responding to her words, the Guardian shifted slightly. A section on its upper surface rotated, creating an opening that looked almost like an eye. A beam of light emerged from this opening, sweeping across the canyon in a slow, deliberate arc. The light passed over the three humans, and for a moment, Thomas felt something he could not quite describe. It was not fear or pain. It was almost like being seen and recognized by something vast and ancient and utterly alien. The light faded. The Guardian returned to its still, watchful state. But everything had changed. The impossible had happened. The Guardian that had stood motionless for 1,358 years was awake. Inside the outpost, emergency protocols were being activated. The director was being informed. Scientists were gathering their equipment. Within hours, the base would be filled with commotion and questions and official procedures. But in this moment, standing before the awakened Guardian with Olivia and Sarah, Thomas felt only peace. They had done what no one else had managed. They had solved an ancient mystery. And they had done it not through perfect planning or careful protocol, but through teamwork, trust, and the willingness to try something unconventional. The days following the Guardian's awakening were chaotic. Scientists from across the sector began arriving at the outpost, eager to study the awakened sentinel. The base was no longer a quiet research facility but a bustling center of activity. Researchers set up equipment around the Guardian, taking measurements and analyzing its structure. News of the awakening spread across human space, and suddenly, the small outpost on Zeta Prime became the most important place in known civilization. But despite all the scientific activity and official procedures, nobody could figure out how to communicate with the Guardian. The researchers took readings and ran analyses, but the Guardian remained silent. It stood in its towering form, light pulsing gently within its crystalline structure, but it did not respond to attempts at communication. The scientists tried sending radio signals, light patterns, and mathematical sequences. Nothing worked. 2 weeks after the awakening, Thomas was sitting in his office, reviewing data with Sarah, when Olivia appeared at his door. She looked frustrated and tired. She had been spending most of her time maintaining the cables and equipment around the Guardian, keeping the systems functioning smoothly. "You people are making this too complicated," she said without preamble. "You are treating it like a radio transmission problem. But it is not. It is a machine. And machines do not think like you do." "What do you mean?" Thomas asked. I mean that the Guardian has been awake for 2 weeks now, and it has not done anything hostile. It has not attacked. It has not left. It just stands there and pulses with light. That tells me it is waiting for something. It is waiting for us to figure out what it wants. Sarah frowned. But we do not know what it wants. That is the problem. Maybe, Olivia said, but I have an idea. The Guardian woke up when we applied energy to it in a specific way. What if we talk to it the same way? Through energy patterns and mechanical responses, not through signals and mathematics. Thomas and Sarah exchanged looks. It was an unusual theory, but Olivia's unconventional thinking had worked before. They decided to give her a chance. Over the next week, Olivia worked with the Guardian in a way no scientist had attempted. She did not use complex instruments or sophisticated analysis. Instead, she climbed onto the Guardian's surface and examined it closely. She felt its texture. She studied the patterns of its crystalline structure. She mapped out the places where energy seemed to flow most strongly. She treated it like she was learning to read its body language. Thomas watched from a distance, documenting everything. At times, he felt concerned that Olivia was being too casual with something so important. But he also recognized that she had already proven herself. She had awakened the Guardian. If anyone was going to understand how to communicate with it, perhaps it would be her. After several days, Olivia made a discovery. She found a section of the Guardian's surface that was different from the rest. It was smoother, and it seemed to have a series of small indentations arranged in a pattern. Olivia spent hours studying this section, running her fingers across it, feeling the texture. Finally, she called Thomas and Sarah over to examine it. This is it, she said. This is how it communicates. Not through signals. Through touch. Through direct physical contact. Sarah was skeptical. We cannot know that for certain. We need to conduct proper tests and gather data. Then conduct your tests, Olivia said. But I am going to try something now. Before anyone could stop her, Olivia placed both her hands on the smooth section of the Guardian's surface. She closed her eyes and stayed still, her palms pressed against the crystal. For several seconds nothing happened. Then the Guardian's light brightened. Colors shifted and swirled across its surface. The harmonic tone that had sounded during its awakening began again, but softer this time, almost like a question. Thomas felt his heart racing. Something was happening. Real communication was taking place, but not in any way the scientists had anticipated. Olivia opened her eyes and stepped back, her expression thoughtful. It is warm again, she said. Warmer than before. And I felt something. Like pulses of energy moving through it. Regular patterns. Like it was responding to me being there. Over the following days, Olivia established a pattern of communication with the Guardian. She would place her hands on the smooth section and wait. The Guardian would respond with energy pulses and light shifts. Gradually, Olivia learned to interpret these responses. She began to understand that the Guardian was not expressing simple yes or no answers. It was conveying complex ideas through patterns and sequences. Thomas brought in specialists in pattern recognition and symbolic language. Together, they worked with Olivia to decode the Guardian's messages. It was slow work, frustrating at times, but gradually a picture began to emerge. The Guardian was asking questions. It wanted to know about humanity. It wanted to understand what species currently inhabited this world and the surrounding space. It wanted to know about their capabilities, their intentions, their dreams. And it seemed particularly interested in understanding the nature of the humans who had awakened it. Thomas realized that this was not random curiosity. The Guardian was evaluating them. It was judging whether humanity was worthy of something important. But worthy of what? That was the central mystery. After 3 weeks of continuous communication, a clear message finally emerged from the patterns. Thomas, Sarah, and Olivia stood before the Guardian while Sarah read the translation aloud. The architects did not abandon this world, she read slowly. They left the Guardian to protect it and to preserve their knowledge. But they also left it to wait. To wait for a civilization that understood both wisdom and courage. A civilization that combined careful study with bold action. A civilization that was not afraid to take risks and try new approaches. The message continued, becoming clearer and more detailed. The architects had understood that the future would be unpredictable. They could not know what challenges would arise. So they had built the Guardian not just as a weapon or a protector, but as a keeper of knowledge and a judge of character. The Guardian has been waiting for over 1,000 years, Sarah continued reading. Many civilizations encountered it and studied it carefully. But all of them approached with caution and fear. All of them tried to solve the problem using only careful planning and established procedures. The Guardian was waiting for a civilization brave enough to try something different. Brave enough to say, "Hold my beer," and actually work with their hands and their hearts, not just their minds. Thomas understood then. The Guardian's message was about Olivia and what she represented. It was about human resourcefulness and determination. It was about the willingness to take risks and trust in unconventional solutions. The Guardian's light pulsed gently, almost like laughter. And Thomas realized that somewhere in this ancient machine, in its vast crystalline structure and its quantum consciousness, the Guardian was expressing something very close to approval. The news of the Guardian's message spread across human space like wildfire. Within weeks, delegations from every major human colony and settlement began arriving at Zeta Prime. Politicians, military commanders, scientists, and engineers all came to witness the awakened Guardian and to understand what it meant for humanity's future. The small research outpost transformed into an international hub of activity and importance. The Galactic Council, a governing body that represented dozens of spacefaring civilizations, officially acknowledged humanity's achievement. For the first time, humans were recognized not as a young and inexperienced species, but as something worthy of respect and consideration. Trade agreements were negotiated. Alliance treaties were signed. Human colonies received access to technologies and knowledge that had been restricted before. The awakening of the Guardian had changed everything. Thomas was promoted to lead the new Architects Legacy Program, an organization dedicated to studying and preserving the knowledge left behind by the ancient architects. He worked with scientists and historians from around human space, documenting everything the Guardian was willing to teach. Sarah became the director of the Xenoarchaeological Division, overseeing research into architect technology and culture. Both of them found themselves in positions of authority and influence, far beyond what they had ever imagined. But Olivia refused any official position or title. She continued to work as a mechanic, maintaining the Guardian and keeping its systems functioning smoothly. When offered promotion after promotion, she simply shook her head and returned to her work. She preferred the practical reality of machines and tools to the political complications of authority and responsibility. This choice made her even more famous. Across human space, stories were told about the mechanic who had awakened an ancient alien sentinel and then refused to become important. Children wore patches on their clothes featuring Olivia's image with the phrase, "Hold my beer," printed beneath it. Universities began offering scholarships in her name. Young engineers and mechanics looked up to her as a hero and role model. Olivia found the attention uncomfortable, but she accepted it with grace. She understood that she represented something valuable to humanity, something that went beyond her individual accomplishments. She represented the idea that practical intelligence and courage were just as important as advanced education and careful planning. She represented the possibility that anyone with determination and willingness to work hard could make a real difference. 5 years after the Guardian's awakening, the research outpost had expanded dramatically. New buildings had been constructed. New equipment had been installed. The settlement had grown from a small research facility to a thriving city of nearly 50,000 people. The Guardian stood at the center of it all, a towering monument to human achievement and cooperation. The Galactic Council decided to hold a formal celebration to mark the 5th anniversary of the awakening. Dignitaries from across human space and even representatives from other spacefaring species arrived for the event. It was planned to be a grand ceremony with speeches and formal recognitions. Thomas had to give a presentation about the research conducted over the past 5 years. Sarah was scheduled to speak about the historical significance of the discovery. But the most important part of the ceremony was meant to be a formal recognition of Olivia's contributions. The council wanted to present her with a Medal of Honor and declare her a hero of humanity. Olivia had agreed to attend, though she had made it clear she was not happy about the formal proceedings. On the day of the celebration, Thomas was preparing his speech when Sarah found him. She was wearing formal clothing and looked nervous. "Have you seen Olivia?" Sarah asked. "The ceremony starts in an hour and nobody can find her." Thomas felt a surge of concern. Olivia would not miss the ceremony. She was many things, but unreliable was not one of them. They searched the main buildings and the administrative offices. They checked the residential areas. Finally, someone suggested they look at the Guardian itself. They found Olivia sitting on top of the Guardian, perched on one of its highest points. She was holding a wrench and a beverage, studying one of the Guardian's external panels. Around her, maintenance equipment was arranged in organized piles. She was working. "Olivia, the ceremony," Sarah called up to her. "It is about to start." Olivia glanced down and smiled. I know. I needed to recalibrate the Guardian's perimeter defense systems. The left sector has been running slightly off frequency. It will take me about another hour. The ceremony cannot wait an hour, Thomas called up. The delegates are already arriving. The council is waiting. Then they can wait a little longer, Olivia replied cheerfully. The Guardian is more important than any ceremony. These defense systems protect the entire settlement. If they are not working properly, it does not matter how many medals we pass out. Thomas and Sarah exchanged looks. This was completely typical of Olivia. She would miss her own formal recognition to maintain the machines she cared for. And in that moment, Thomas understood why the Guardian had responded to her so strongly. The Guardian had been looking for someone with her values, someone who understood that real work and real responsibility mattered more than fame or recognition. Come down when you are finished, Thomas said finally. We will tell the council you were delayed by important maintenance work. Thank you, Olivia said, returning her attention to her work. The ceremony proceeded without Olivia, which created a strange energy among the assembled dignitaries. They had come to honor this woman who had accomplished the impossible, and she was not even present. Some found it disrespectful. Others found it oddly admirable. The council presented her medal to Thomas, who accepted it on her behalf. Olivia arrived at the formal reception 2 hours later, still covered in dust and machine oil from her work. She was wearing her work clothes, not formal attire. Several dignitaries looked shocked. But when Olivia walked across the room to speak with the council representatives, people instinctively moved aside, showing her respect despite her casual appearance. She accepted the medal with a simple thank you and immediately began asking questions about new Guardian systems that the council had information about. Within minutes, she was in the middle of a technical discussion with several engineers and scientists, completely unconcerned with the formal ceremony happening around her. Thomas watched this scene with quiet satisfaction. This was the new era that the Guardian's awakening had created. It was not an era defined by politics or power struggles. It was an era defined by work and cooperation. It was an era where a mechanic with practical skills and courage could stand equal with presidents and military commanders. Over the following years, humanity prospered. With the Guardian's protection and the knowledge shared by the architect's legacy, human civilization expanded and flourished. New colonies were established. New technologies were developed. But the foundation of all this progress remained unchanged. It was built on the principle that had awakened the Guardian in the first place. The combination of careful study with bold practical action, the willingness to trust instinct alongside intelligence, and the understanding that real progress comes from those willing to work hard and take risks. Olivia continued her work as a mechanic, maintaining the Guardian and training new technicians. She never sought greater authority or recognition. She was content with her work and with the knowledge that she had helped change the course of human history. And whenever young people asked her for advice about their careers, she would smile and say the same thing her famous phrase had implied from the beginning. Do not be afraid to try something different. Do not let other people's caution stop you from taking action. Work with your hands. Trust your instincts. And sometimes you might be surprised by what you can accomplish. That was the real legacy of Olivia Webb and the Guardian's awakening. Not a medal or a statue or a moment of fame, but an entire civilization inspired to believe in the power of unconventional thinking and courageous action.